And then the other main thing that I can think of, besides like gaming or reading, writing, artists, people who are creating. I guess it would vary depending on what you're creating. The visual artists who are using like Photoshop and those, they tend to, seems like, gravitate more to Apple.
Yeah.
Is that true for like photos and video as well then?
Yeah, most of the time. And it's quite kind of interesting because Apple doesn't have the greatest hardware for that, but they have some great software. And at a time, at one point in time, because their operating system was pretty efficient, it was a better computer than a Windows computer with the same specs. But nowadays, a Windows computer with the same specs versus an Apple computer with the same specs runs about the same. But the software runs about the same. There have been certain things where the software that they use, like what is it? There was like a video software that Apple, I can't remember what it was. I think it's Final Cut. That's an Apple video software. Even that software specifically can render better than a Windows computer. Renders super fast, and that's just must be the efficiency of building on Mac for the whole time it understands Mac. That's what I'm assuming, but for the most part, you can get a more powerful system building a separate, because right now one of the big problems with Mac is once you buy a Mac, like that's it. You can't upgrade it. You can't really change it. There's no and what is it? And then you're limited to whatever Mac they build or they come out with next year. But what is it? This year's or last winter, I think, was the first iMac that's come out in a while, a few years.
What is an iMac?
iMac is their giant computer,
that's
all-in-one
mostly
computer.
Screen. It's like a slightly thicker screen.
Yeah, and I think that was the first one that's come out in a few years. So,
but I see what you mean. You can't really upgrade it because everything's made to fit like a puzzle in that
there was a lot of video editors that had to resort to using the MacBook Pros because those were actually more powerful machines than the MacBook that they had, which is taking over their desktop. And then they also had the problem of what is it? The only modular one that they came out with was like 10 years ago, and nowadays they literally call it a garbage can because it looks like a garbage can. And now I guess there's a new one. There's a new modular one coming out this year, Mac. So we'll see how that works.
Back to the software question. There's more that I have to ask there. You said now the Apple to Android. Is it called Android if it's a computer? Or is Android's more like the mobile operating system?
Apple versus Google would be the direct comparisons between the company.
Okay, so I guess then Google devices, like I'm talking more. Would it be Windows computers, like PCs, personal computers, versus Apple computers, right?
Okay.
Personal computers is general term.
Personal computers would just are generally you're talking about Windows.
Okay.
PCs.
Any like laptop from whatever third party Google whatever. Okay, so the software that's available for those is pretty comparable to the Apple software that's available, and it's different, like apps versus programs a little bit. And you were saying like the Final Cut, some of the software isn't quite equitable, but most of it is.
Most of it is, because like most of the time, especially if you're using these software, there's a version of it that is probably exclusive to Apple. There's a version of it that's probably exclusive to Windows, and then there's probably
why is it Like,
yeah, it's because
coding
you would
behind
need
it.
yeah, you would need a whole separate code to run on Apple versus Windows, because Apple is a Linux platform while Windows is a DOS system.
Okay.
So yeah, it's coded differently, but some companies build for both, right? So Adobe Photoshop and Adobe Premiere Pro, it has an Apple version and a Windows version, and those and like it works just fine on both of them. And between Adobe Premiere Pro and Final Cut, one may be more efficient than the other in certain areas, but it's really at that point like what you prefer, what you like to do, which system that you like better, because there's just minute differences in how the software works, and whichever one you get used to, you end up just staying with.
Yeah.